Yeah, so excited to talk to you. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long, long time, and I haven't had the chance. But having worked with some of my closest colleagues, Lissa, David, Patrick, finally the my chance has come. So I'm re Catherine Austin Fitts is a bona fide and rare national treasure, an intellectual and key public figure in the war against political, economic, and ethical forms of corruption. With undergraduate and graduate studies at the University of Pennsylvania, she is a former public official appointed by President George H.W. Bush to serve as Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. With considerable expertise in investment banking and creative financing, she served as managing director of Dillon Read and Company. She's written widely about the subject of public spending and various instances of gross fraud and malfeasance. Catherine is president of Solari Incorporated, publisher of the Solari Report, and founder and managing member of Solari Investment Advisory Services. Welcome, Catherine. I'm
Thank you.
so
And
glad.
you forgot to mention, and a great admirer of your work.
Uh, I know you're. I hope that you're not embarrassed by what I've said, but because I know that you're.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Thank you for
So,
too.
so one of the challenges that we all face when we do what you and I do, and we try and communicate honestly about what's really going on, you end up having to describe your entire history in great detail. And I was raised a Quaker, and so you never talked about yourself. You always talked about other people or great issues or whatever, but it was considered narcissism to talk about yourself. But having gone through, so many audits and investigations and public trials and whatever, you have to talk about yourself ad nauseum. So it's
I'm,
I'm used to many creative descriptions.
one thing I'd like to talk to you about is sovereignty. And I have an interest in money. I used to, I don't know in the best terms to put this in for a kind of largely secular audience, but I have occasionally said in prayers that don't make me too rich that I forget you, Lord,
Right,
and
right,
don't make me too poor that I go for wanting. But
right.
I've always had this love-hate relationship with money. So that's one of the things I'd like to talk to you.
Oh, well, I would love to talk to you about that because and let me just step back because sovereignty for me is a magical word. I think individual sovereignty and then sovereignty in the governments we choose to help us manage resources is
Hmm.
very, very important. And a lot of Solari's work over the last 2 years has been helping government officials achieve sovereignty. What are the things they need in the financial area to do to achieve sovereignty? And my interest in all the financial issues is really the goal is sovereignty and freedom. The goal is got nothing to do with money because money is just a tool. But when the central control was clearly coming at us, John Titus is my co-host on the Salary Report, and I asked John to write a series of pieces for our quarterly magazine. The first one he wrote was on the Going Direct Reset, which was the real plan to reset, and that the central bankers had worked on. And I tried to explain to him where this was all going, and he thought I was being a little extreme because I kept saying, "Look, what they want is slavery. This is not a reengineering of the financial system. This is slavery." He's like, because John's a very serious attorney. He's like, "Well, I think that's a little extreme." So he does going direct, and I tried to persuade him. I said, "Look, the plans are up at BlackRock. They published them. Go get them." Anyway, he was like, "Holy cow!" So then I said, "Okay, do CBDCs." So I'm telling him it's a slavery system, and he thinks I'm a little extreme, and he comes back and he says, "Oh my God, this
Mm.
is the slavery system." So then his next piece, it's huge, and if you don't have it, I'll send it to you, is a huge publication on sovereignty and how that relates to the financial system.
Mm.
And then, then we went, the next thing I've done is how the states can create sovereignty.
Mm.
What can the states because the US has the US Constitution, and the states under the Constitution have extraordinary powers.
Yeah.
And they delegate the powers to the federal government, and when they haven't delegated or reserved to them. But it all comes down to the money because I'd love to tell you several little vignettes about money that I think will inform what you're thinking about. One of the Idaho senators, great group in northern Idaho, one of the Idaho senators said to me, every year we send $1 to Washington and then we get $1.19 back. And he said, every time I try and defend the Constitution, my constituents tell me I'd rather have the 19 cents. And what you'll see in the organization of the federal dollars is the use of money to buy control and to buy consensus.
Mm.
And it depends, of course, on printing, and which depends on the global system agreeing to subsidize this and how they trade dollars for real assets.
Mm.
And as the global system resists providing that subsidy, the question for the US leadership and the European leadership is well, if we can't get the subsidy, how are we going to buy consensus? Well, let's get total control. And we're back to, solutions involve collapsing sovereignty. And
Mm.
that's where, and one way to look at that issue is it comes down to taxation with or without representation.
Yeah.
Because when you go to a total controlled financial system, guess what? Right.
Yeah. Last month, I found myself in a somewhat heated debate with a colleague of mine about the looming prospect that hard currency would, soon be replaced by digital money. And what was really, I think, pretty frustrating for me was my inability to encourage him to consider more carefully how digital money represents a brutal and deceptive trap, promising
Right.
illusion of speed, security, convenience, but ultimately, setting people up to be slaves to, this
Right.
that kind of locks us in to obedience.
So if you go to Solari,
Mm.
there is a little section on the homepage that says video shorts. And we have uh, different playlists of video shorts. The first one is financial transaction freedom. And the first three or four, the first three I use for that exact debate. So they are each 1 minute and they describe, or it's a central banker telling you that they're going to institute complete control with your money. And I have never, Daniel, shown those 3 1 minute videos. I can sit down in a state legislator's office who doesn't understand there's a problem. I
Mm.
show them those 3 1 minute videos, and literally some of them look like they're going to run to the bathroom to throw up.
Mm.
And they get it. They see it. So I recommend that to you because we know the problem and we're always looking for ways of communicating to people who think this is, oh, gee, it's really convenient and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if you know it, both Sweden and Norway, who've been in the lead of getting rid of cash and checks, have
Mhm.
come out and said it was a mistake to try and destroy cash. We're going to try and reverse it and build back up because you can't depend on electricity. And in these disasters, if you don't have cash, you know, it's dangerous.
Mm.
So we're going to take it the other way. We were wrong, both Norway and Sweden.
That's pretty considerable.
Yes,
Thinking in light of what Richard Werner said, I believe it was last year about
right.
CBDCs, which was utterly shocking.
Yeah. Yeah. And my get, I mean, he didn't say which central banker, that was, but I thought the central banker was referring to the Swedish central bank.
Oh.
So that's my guess. Richard hasn't said that, and I don't know. But I don't know who the central bank was he quoted, but then
Mm.
he was referring to a central bank that wanted, one of the oldest in Europe, which of course the two oldest are Sweden and the Netherlands.
What about Switzerland?
I would have to go see when the Swiss bank was created. I don't know, but it was Sweden to me, the Swedes and the Dutch really invented the
Okay.
central banking warfare model. But of course, then the Brits got a hold of it, and they and the Dutch were, they compete, cooperate. It's really funny if you read the whole history of the North Sea.
Mhm.
Basically, they invade each other, slaughter each other, kill each other. Then they go back to trading and cooperating together. Then they marry each other. Then they go back to slaughtering each other. It goes on like this from Charlemagne to the modern day. But so the West India Company and the East India Company competed like cats and dogs. But between the two of them, they really did evolve the central banking warfare model, the Dutch and the English. But Sweden can claim they started it, I think.
Can you offer our audience maybe just your perspective on the hidden dangers that we're really not seeing as regards this coming digitalized system of exchange?
Okay, and I don't want to talk about it like it's inevitable. I want to talk about it like, okay, we need to stop it.
Okay.
And because I do think they're going to fail. And the question is how many people are they going to destroy and kill on the way to failure? That's my concern. So there was a wonderful documentary made in the Netherlands during the pandemic called State of Control. It was documentary of the year on the Solari report. And if you want to understand the dangers, I think it's an excellent introduction. But essentially, what we're talking about is if you look at digital technology, think of this as you have all these different digital technologies that are digitizing different processes. So we have QR codes and we have smart meters and we have satellites and surveillance and we have Wi-Fi. And if you we have one presentation where we draw a circle and we show all these different component parts. When you add to those component parts a 100% digital transaction system. So instead of having dollars and or currency and checks, everything has to be done digital. Then what happens is you turn over to the banking system 100% complete control.
Hmm.
Um, Now, to do that, you need a very high quality digital ID, which is why the digital ID debate in the United States right now is so tense. But I need to be able to know that Daniel's Daniel and Catherine's Catherine with very high precision. So you
Hmm.
need very Six Sigma data system.
Hmm.
But if you combine a digital ID with an all digital transaction system, then I have the ability to implement technocracy. I can make lots of complicated rules and I can literally implement those rules with AI and software and digital systems so that my control can be very invasive. So let's go back to the pandemic.
Hmm.
Let's say I don't want people leaving their home further than a kilometer or a mile. I can, with all the digital systems locked into place, make sure that your money won't work. If you leave more than a mile, let's say you break the rules and you go further than a mile, your money won't work. Your mobile phone payment system won't work. Your credit card won't work. Your bank account won't work. You are frozen out a mile out and you can be punished. Okay, you broke the rules. We're going to turn your bank account off for a week. We have a mandated pharmaceutical therapy for you. If you refuse to take it, we turn off your money. Your bank account won't work. Your credit card won't work. We've all seen the movie, like one of my favorites is Enemy of the State with Will Smith.
Mhm.
Suddenly, they turn off his credit cards. His credit cards won't work, right? So now what that does is by controlling your money with a social credit system and AI and software, I can have the equivalent of 24/7. If have you ever seen the movie The Lives of Others?
I
It's
haven't.
about East Germany and a guy in East Germany before the wall comes down who's under 24/7 surveillance.
Mhm.
So he's got Stasi teams on him all, around the clock, listening to his phone calls, tracking him, watching him. So we have the digital equivalent of that. We have 80 different companies and 3 or 10 different governments, all with teams of AI bots tracking us all day long, every day, trying to extract information, trying to influence and nudge us, and trying to get us to do something that's good for them. There's no AI or bot who says, okay, I'm going to make sure Daniel has a free and inspired life and do everything I can to make sure I take all these different competing interests and optimize them for Daniel's benefit. That doesn't exist if you don't do it because it's just trying, you know, you've got 150 AI bots on you,
Mm.
and to them you're prey. That's all. You're just prey. Now, and I mean prey with an E, not an A. So there it's an extraction model. It's parasitic,
Yeah.
and it's like having a tapeworm. And think of this as thousand little digital tapeworms coming at you. So so anyway, so that system is no longer a currency system. It's a control system.
Yeah.
And the your assets. So when the World Economic Forum says it's 2030 and you have no assets, they're serious. They're really serious. And they're implementing in many different ways the ways to claw and take your assets. And we can talk about all of those. But essentially, what they're trying to do is put you in a position where you are 100% dependent day by day by day to do what they want and follow their rules.
Mm.
And if you don't, they will literally shut you out of the system. It's a slavery model. It's not, it's no longer a currency, it's a slavery model. Now, there's a big debate in the United States. Is the slavery model going to be implemented directly by the Fed and the New York Fed? Or is it going to be implemented directly using stable coins by the New York Fed member banks who own the New York Fed? So, on the theory that it's free and it's not CBDC, which is ridiculous. It's the meet the new boss, same as the old boss. It's just, they moving the boxes around. Anyway, but 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 you're talking about programmable money, which is designed not to be, it's no currency because there's no
Right.
liquidity.
It's no longer a currency.
It's a technocracy with the financial transaction system being used to implement all the rules. One of the frustrations I have, and I understand your frustration in dealing with this, I have so many wonderful allies who are working so hard to get laws passed to protect health freedom and food freedom and the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. I keep telling them, you are spending all your time, trying to protect these things. And if they get financial transaction control, they will be able to undo 100% of what you're trying to do. So why don't you help me get financial transaction freedom squared away? Because 100% of your time, if they get that, you're wiped.
Yeah.
And I literally all day long, I was like, why are you asking me to help you with this when you know it will just get reversed if we don't get financial transaction freedom?
Right.
It's so remarkable. It's like a trance. There's a trance. So one of the things I'd love to do is go back and talk about where the real solutions are and how you could fall in love with money. Can I do that?
Sure. Let's explore that.
Okay.
The love
Okay.
of money.
Yeah. Because I think money is a wonderful tool. And for me, money is a tool. It's the tool I use to map the world. So, there's an official reality and then there's reality.
Mm.
And the official reality is like yak, 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 yak. And reality is totally different. When I was a little girl growing up, I lived a life where I went back and forth between many worlds and I saw the extreme of in my world, there were multiple official realities and then there was one reality and I was like trying to come up with a system on how to how to map out what was going on so I knew where I was and what was going on and I came up with the mathematics of time and money are one of the best tools for most phenomena, not all phenomena, but for most phenomena. Anyway, so money is a fabulous mapping tool. Okay, so I want to take you back to the community where you grew up with when you were a kid. So in your community, you had life, you had people, you had the soil, you had trees, you had livestock, you might have had to drive if you were in the city or the suburb. You had to drive a while to get to the chickens, but you had all life, whether it's the animals, the air, everything was alive, right?
It's
Okay, so I call that living equity. And if you come to our building wealth curriculum under living equity, you have things like culture and education and whatever. Now, what I'm going to tell you is all financial wealth, all financial profit, all Everything people refer to as money, financial assets,
Mhm.
it all comes from life, right?
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
A family has children and grandchildren. They build a business, they build an enterprise, they use their living intelligence to, do products and services that help their neighbors. And over centuries, it builds and then they sell it, but the way they create financial equity is by being good at life.
Hmm.
They take their time, they take their intelligence, they take their, okay. So you have this very intimate relationship between living equity. Now, so example, let's look at the problems that the federal government in the United States is having with its budget.
Mhm.
Our military budget, running a global military, is about 860 billion, $870 billion a year right now. That's the overt budget. Our Medicare, Medicaid, and healthcare budget is more than double that. It's
Wow.
1.8 billion because that is the price of poisoning your population, right? Some of it's aging. You have
Yeah.
an aging population, but you are poisoning your population. Mark Skidmore just did an analysis that showed if we went back to 2010 levels of disability, that budget would drop by $500 billion.
Wow.
I know, right. Very
Yeah.
expensive. So what you've got is everybody's making money on poisoning the population. So the pharmaceutical companies are making money. The congressmen and senators are getting big capital, getting big political donations. Everybody's CDC's getting bigger and bigger budgets. Doctors are making more money, giving everybody more pills. So you have an entire society that is making money on poisoning their people. You got a win-lose relationship between life and financial equity. Okay, so let me keep going. Back to your neighborhood.
Hmm.
So in your neighborhood, people are saving and doing financial things. They're building housing, right? They're starting businesses. They're running businesses. When I was a little girl, I'd come out and the Philadelphia Bulletin, there somebody drop off a stack of papers, put a little plastic cup, and we'd put our nickels in, right?
Mhm.
And then the nickels would grow and grow and grow, and then they would drive back in a couple hours, and somebody'd get the cup, and nobody stole anything, right? It's you didn't need digital technologies. It's much more energy efficient and environmentally efficient, just being honest. Anyway, if you do an analysis of a neighborhood and all the financial flows in the neighborhood, here's what you will find in the United States. What you will find is that there is a win-lose. So let me give you one other indicator. And I came up with this when I was Assistant Secretary of Housing. My first 30 days as Assistant Secretary, everybody was lobbying me, lobbying me, lobbying me to do something that would make their stock go up. And I finally realized after 30 days, there's no constituency to make neighborhoods wonderful. Everybody just wants their stock to go up, and they're not thinking about, okay, how is Pittsburgh wonderful? How is Philadelphia wonderful? How is West Philadelphia wonderful? How
Mhm.
is how is South Philly wonderful? And so I said, I need a performance indicator. I have a performance indicator for financial equity. It's called the Dow Jones. Now it's the S&P. I need a performance indicator for the wonderfulness of neighborhoods. So what I came up with, I called the popsicle index.
Mhm.
So I grew up in West Philadelphia. If you've ever listened to Bill Cosby, he was South Philly, but it was very similar.
Mhm.
everything was on the street. It was street football, street baseball,
Yeah.
bottle caps, jacks, that kind of thing. Anyway, so we would always run up on our own up to there was a there was a like a pharmacy up on Spruce Street and 48th, but it had pinball machines and comic books. So we would run up there, get a popsicle or some kind of, treat and read the comics and play the pins and come home. That was that was entertainment.
Mhm.
So so I came up with the popsicle index, and the popsicle index is the percent of people in a community who believe a child can leave their home, go to the nearest place to buy a popsicle, and come home alone safely. They're free to roam.
Right.
There's a British scholar who has a thing called free to roam, and he takes a community and he maps out over the generations how much freedom the kids have to roam. And we're down to almost nothing because nobody thinks the kids are safe. Right.
Mhm.
Okay. So my description of the US economy since World War II is the popsicle index started at 100%,
Mhm.
and the Dow Jones when I was a little girl was 150.
Mm.
So the stock market has gone up thousands of percentage up,
Mhm.
and I don't. It's very rare you find a place in America where mothers don't think the popsicle index is zero. Right. So you have a win-lose relationship
Mhm.
between living equity and financial equity. And what you've got is you've got a financial leadership in the financial system, which is making money in the financial system by extracting and parasiting life.
Mhm.
So we're destroying the soil, we're destroying the environment, we're destroying. Now, when you get into, government, a sovereign government is supposed to be about setting the rules on the economy so you have a win-win relationship, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that you don't destroy your soil, you don't, poison your people in a way that you end up exploding your government budgets. What you discover, so what I did during the Clinton administration, my company was the lead financial advisor to HUD, and we were, in my opinion, the leader in the world on reengineering federal programs. We were just, I can talk about that, kids. I have a unique insight into Doge and what's really going on, knowing a lot about that sort of little niche in the world. But what you just so I discovered relational database technology,
Mhm.
and I downloaded all the government data, federal data on appropriations, regulations, everything we could get our hands on, and we put it into relational databases where instead of looking at things by housing, military, health, you could look Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. You could do place-based financial statements.
Mm.
So if you own a stock, you get an annual report from the company and says, here's what we did with your money last year. If you're voting for political representation from a congressional district, you should get a financial statement that says, here's the sources and uses of money and other resources in your district.
Mm.
When I, your congressman, come to the town hall and you have the financial statements and you can say, okay, here's what we think about what you did with our money. So you can have an intelligent conversation. But the government keeps all of that basically buried. It's either secret or buried. And so, the finance chairman for certain campaigns can see that information, but generally most people have no idea where it is. Okay. If you study the government money isn't allocated to optimize the economy. It's allocated to centrally control. And what you watch if you study federal expenditures, it's designed year after year, decade after decade to centralize control. And as you centralize control, you get an economy which is less productive and less productive and less productive. And you have this win lose relationship between the living equity and the financial equity. Now, here's the little secret.
Mm.
If you could turn this around, if you could build an economy which had a win-win relationship, the capital gains is explosive. It's unbelievable. And I think it's one of the reasons. And then if you add new energy technology, it's just like, you're talking about trillions of dollars. And if you look at why these guys want to go to total control, I think, the only way they can centralize ownership and control of that capital gains is through total control,
Right.
and which is why they haven't let the two come back into balance. The problem is if you get that total control, the way you bring things back into balance is depopulation. And of course, that's what we're watching. So for many years, what happened was, if you read my online book, I explain all of this,
Mm.
because I was looking for a solution to how we evolve the model for new technology. The central banking were for, the big model. So I was kind of looking for the solutions, and, they wanted to keep centralizing. So I had to go. And that's where my sort of big battle came.
Mm.
But so basically, since then, what I've tried to understand is what are the covert flows in the economy, and why are they, instead of choosing an optimization model and an evolution, why are they choosing total control? Now, what happened, there was a 1995 budget deal that busted. And right after that, what happened was described to me by the president of the largest pension fund in the country, CalPERS. He said, "You don't understand. We've given up on the country. We're moving all the money out starting in the fall." And that was the beginning of what I call the financial coup. In 1997, the beginning of fiscal 1998, they started to move massive amounts of money out of the country. The budget deal had been designed, Daniel, to get the actuarial basis of the retirement systems on a solid ground. And when they couldn't do it, they just started re-engineering. And because the way to re-engineer the fundamental governance system of the United States, in their opinion, was just do it. But
Mhm.
first, you take all the assets, you pull all the money.
Mhm.
And so between fiscal 1998 and 2015, 21 trillion went missing out of federal government accounts. And that's when Dr. Skidmore showed up and helped me document how much was missing. I had it up to 12 trillion, and he and his students did a survey and established it was 21. But at the time, he said to me, and you will laugh at this because of your work during the pandemic, he said, "Nobody cares about this, you know, because I kept publishing and highlighting and talking, and I was putting everybody to sleep year after year after year. And, my team was like, why do you keep boring everybody with this?" And I kept saying, if we don't deal with the retirement issues, the only way they can balance the budget is to lower life expectancy.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, I remember sitting in the parking lot of in Bolivar, Tennessee. I was doing an errand, talking to Mark, and he was saying, why would you give up on this?" And I keep saying, "Don't you understand? They're lowering life expectancy, and they're going to have to accelerate the lowering of life expectancy if we don't do something about it. They're going to have to, people are going to die. They're going to depopulate." And Mark was like, he would just shake his head and say, I just don't see this. And then the pandemic started, and I was like, well, here we go. Now,
Well,
they've been lowering life expectancy literally the month after the budget deal busted. They approved OxyContin at the FDA. And if you look at and they approved the predatory lending and the mortgages, and literally the pill mills, the the SWAT teams for the war on drugs and the private prisons and the predatory lending all just hit those neighborhoods like a bomb.
yeah. Well, hasn't that been the prevailing ideology over the past at least 200 years? This sort of Malthusian interpretation of populations. It seems to me that that's the principal reason why we're seeing such anti-human policies that are being crafted and put in place around the world is to lower populations, reduce populations and reduce the ability of people to reproduce.
Right, right. So this has been going at I call it plunder capitalism. This has been going for a long time. What is different to me, if you look at the conversations you would have with the people who ran the financial system in 60 or 70 or 80,
Mhm.
you see an evolution from people feeling like we have an obligation to build civilization and do our best to help the hoi polloi rise.
Mhm.
And some of them can rise, and we will always try and cream off the best and bring them up. That refreshes, and we find dealing with the hoi polloi very productive, but we will put things in place where we bring up the best and then we'll have them deal with them. you know. So they found it frustrating, but they could manage it. Now what you get is you get, you got, so you get this noblesse oblige and a way of the classes to kind of coexist.
Mhm.
They could be very brutal, but there was a commitment to civilization and
Right.
to try and help people rise. That evolved into extreme frustration. And part of it was if you're the bankers in charge of monetary policy and the Congress is in charge of fiscal policy, it was devolving into the only way you could get people to go along with an intelligent global solution was to pay them off and buy them off and shut them up and dumb them down.
Mhm.
And the more you dumb people down, the less respect you had for them. And it took extraordinary efforts to get Congress to go along with necessary things. And you had more and more frustration, and the level of disrespect for the general population went up and up and up. And the reason I was working on place-based reengineering of the financial system was I said, look, the population will take responsibility so long as you have local systems which incentivize the productive to control.
Mhm.
Right now, you are incentivizing the slugs to control,
Right.
and you're getting a devolution down because you are making it impossible for the real leaders at the local level to run a tight ship. You've got to have a responsibility. You've got to have a feedback loop financially where the people who drive the popsicle index up and financial equity up make money,
Mhm.
as opposed to the people who destroy everything and send you a check for it. So you need the people who build the community. You need the civic leaders to have more power than the drug dealers. And you set up a system where the drug dealers were running the neighborhoods, and you could extract wealth, but you were wrecking the overt economy. So
Mm.
anyway, but you could make, as long as you had the federal credit, if I can guarantee all the mortgages with the federal credit, then I can destroy a neighborhood repeatedly and still make money because I, the local banker, am not losing money on the mortgages. I'm sticking it to Freddie, Fannie, and the FHA fund and Ginnie. And that's part of what's ballooning the debt. So organized crime became really, which they wanted and needed to finance the black budget. Organized crime took over. And then when they sort of gave up on the country, they
Mm.
literally said, okay, we're going to let the guys, we're going to stop using our political capital to stop organized crime from going out of control.
Right.
And they did. And organized crime went out of control in a way that made them a ton of money. So
Mm.
long as they were getting their percentage, they were happy. And they literally, we have watched the United States being plundered. Now, the United States has been plundered for 250 years. So if you go back and look at all the sort of the way they cycle the economy and extract, this game has been going on for a long time. But digital technology, as you have documented, turns it into a whole new and much more invasive and horrible game. In the old days, if you were smart and understood the game, you could duck it, you could avoid it, you could do well
Mm.
despite it. Now we're talking about something which is much, much more controlling, invasive, and extractive.
Well,
So it's a whole digital technology makes this a whole new cycle.
well, it's an extremely brilliant business practice. I mean, if you think in terms of, I'm reminded of the film Network, and that one scene
Right.
where the news anchor is being lectured by the CEO in the big corporate headquarters, the room, the lights go dim, and he's talking about, the world as a college of corporations. It seems to me that this is the sort of the reality we're living in right now, that the best business practices, the best business practices are kind of being superimposed upon
Well,
society, on human
well,
beings.
and the best business practices are fraudulent. I mean,
Yeah,
they're criminal.
yeah.
And we're watching major corporations adopt criminal. And I have to tell you, I think one of the things that really made this go is using high technology entrainment and subliminal programming. So I think part of what comes with digital technology is the ability at very low cost to mind control people. Now, the secret societies for at least 1,000 years have had mind control technology. Criminal hypnosis was not new. It was just labor intensive.
Right.
Now you're able to do 1,000-year-old secret society indoctrination and mind control, but you're able to do it for pennies on the dollar through digital technology, and the payback is immediate because you can get them to buy a lot more stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. So you combine marketing. I mean, think about it. I'm a criminal and you're honest. And me as a criminal has mind control technology to market, and you're not using that, and I win the market, right? So you got this negative feedback loop. The more you use crime to win in the marketplace, the more the consumers like you.
Yeah.
So politically and economically, the feedback loop to the leadership is crime pays in a, in a way that, because remember, you can make the, instead of me coming in and burglarizing your house and burning your house down with arson, and direct physical, I can just come into Lahaina and make it look like I can pretend it's a natural fire, right? And you won't sell your land, I can get it anyway.
Right. What was it? Smedley D. Butler so eloquently described how, you know, war is this great for business. And, we see so many levels of warfare being carried out.
Well, here's the thing, and it's part of, creating a society of autistic or sort of Asperger syndrome
Mm,
business leaders. What you've done is you've created so many different ways of creating people and educating people so they have no empathy for other people.
mm,
So, for example, I don't know if you ever saw Enron. I had to do a real deep dive on Enron, so I learned a lot about Enron. But you would see these films of these energy traders who thought it was really funny to game the California energy market and bankrupt tons of small businesses. And they thought it was funny. It was like a video game.
oh,
And, but I've seen this. I can't tell you. I was at the Aspen Institute in 2017, and it was a crypto conference. It was full of lovely young people who were, very excited and enthusiastic about Bitcoin.
mm,
So I'm listening to a guy who's running for president in the Libertarian. It was one of the first trial balloons I ever saw on how they wanted to use Bitcoin to basically implode governments. Anyway, so this guy gets up and he says, I'm gonna win the presidency, and when I do, I'm gonna shut down the government. And when I shut down the government, I'm gonna auction off all the assets, and I'm gonna give everybody Bitcoin so they'll be fine. And so I got up and I said, okay, 40 to 50% of the total income in any of the 3,100 counties in America comes from the federal government. So if you shut that off on day one, I said, this is exactly what they did in Russia. If you
mm,
shut that off, they have enough money to go for 3 weeks, then they have enough food to go for another 3 weeks, and then they, can survive without food for another 3 weeks, and then they start to die off. And that's exactly, the Russian population dropped dramatically.
mm,
And I said, now what that means is you will send, so 40 to 50% of the income in all counties just stops, at which point all the retail that lives off that income stops. And now 70% of the economy stops,
mm.
which means that Goldman Sachs can now pick up all the assets you're going to auction off at 10 cents, at pennies on the dollar. So
Right.
Goldman Sachs will be in heaven. They'll be great and make a fortune. And everybody's cheering for him. They're like, "This is so cool. We'll switch to Bitcoin. It's great." So I said to the audience, I said, "Okay, so you want your father's military pension to be turned off. You want your grandmother's social security to be turned off. You want the federal contracts that support half the employment in your county shut off. Is that really what you want? Do
Mm,
you want to destroy, you're set to inherit $1 million to $2 million from your parents.
mm,
Do you want that money wiped out so that you inherit nothing? Is that really what you want?"
mm,
There was a complete inability to connect the dots
mm.
between, their family's income, their own income, and their own family wealth and what the guy was talking about.
Yeah, it's like money has become so abstracted that we don't see how it relates to human beings and life. It's just this tool or this token that we can hoard at the consequence of the effects that it has on people around you, communities,
So I
states.
would say this: your money is being used to track and herd you, and ultimately herd you into the digital concentration camp. And you need, instead of money being your master, you need to master your money. It's that simple. It's
Yeah.
just a tool. But it is being used to do surveillance and control you. And you need to learn how the system works so that you can master the money. And anybody can do it. It's not, in our job at Solari, so our tagline is actionable intelligence for a free and inspired life. And we have a building wealth curriculum, And it's got six pillars. One is living equity, one is financial equity. There are four other pillars.
Mm.
And what we tell people is, in this environment, you're in a war, so you're part of omni-war. And in omni-war, the game of omni-war is not to make money. The game of omni-war is to live and to live freely and to survive, right?
Mm.
And money is just one of the tools. But the most important tools is you've probably heard me say this. I tell everybody the currency of the future is relationships of trust.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So if you don't have a network or society or family or community of people you can trust, you're toast. I don't care how much you can have $2 trillion. It was funny. So I decided in 1998, I was in Washington and I saw what they were doing with the unipolar model. And I said, you're going to fail. I don't want to be part. You're going to fail. I don't want to be part. I'm going to leave. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to go out in the wilderness and I'm going to figure out how to not fail. I don't want Western civilization to fail. I want to be part of something excellent. So I'm out of this. And off I went. And I considered my odds very slim, but I was raised to believe that you can be part of a project that takes longer than your life. So
Mhm.
I thought, okay, well, I can contribute. But it seemed to me that there had to be a way through the changes upon us other than complete central control
Mhm.
and other than using organized crime to basically extract an economy that depended on the stupid people showing up.
Mhm.
So let me tell you another story. This is how I went to work in government. I was sitting in the boardroom at Dillon Reed. We had a banking meeting every week. And this was in 1988. And we had an LBO group that would finance LBOs. And First Boston was doing the Federated Campo deal. And they wanted to come in as part of their bridge line. So we would be with them, but they would be in the lead. And one of the bankers made a presentation on the deal. And in the deal, there was a sources and uses of funds. And in the uses, there was 220 million to come up out front to pay the investment bankers, lawyers, and top executives big money.
Mhm.
So we would extract these huge fees and make a lot of money. In the sources of funds, there was $150 million of productivity improvements that the middle managers would stick around and work hard for 15 years to generate a portion of the money we were going to take out up front. So they were going to spend the next 15 years of their lives making us rich, right?
Mhm.
So I looked at the sources and uses and I said to the guy who was running, Steve Fenster, I said, Steve, this isn't going to work. These guys can read. This is going to be a public document, the prospectus. They're going to walk with their feet. They're not going to stick around and work for the next 15 years to make us rich. And he looked at me, and it was this look that you'd get is like, I knew we shouldn't make a woman a partner. This is exactly why you can't make a woman a partner. Looking at me with this billboard look. And finally, one of the partners says, my middle name's Austin. He says, Austin, we'll be out in December, meaning we're doing the bridge line. We get the fees and we get out. So by the time the thing craters, we'll be out. And I turned to him and I said, Harry, our bond buyers, the people that we sell the bonds to, will not be out. They'll take the loss. Those are our customers. And they all looked at me like, we knew we shouldn't have made a girl a
Right, right.
partner. And I walked out. I went downstairs. I walked into the office of one of the guys who works for me, and I said, "How'd you like to go to Washington?" He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The fraud has reached levels where this is going to collapse. Let's be part of the cleanup team. There's nothing we can do here."
Wow.
And so that's what we did. We went in, and sure enough, it collapsed, and we got to be, we were right at the top of the lead of the cleanup team. It was very, very fascinating.
That's a great story.
Ah, I get, it's you can always see, there's always at the intimate level of your day-to-day life
Mm.
the signal as to what's really going on.
Mm.
And what I love about money is if you are a portfolio strategist and you're looking at all the money from, because the community is the molecule and the planet is the body.
Mm.
And to understand the body, you have to understand a molecule. To understand the molecule, you have to understand the body. And, the funny thing about my career was when I was a kid and seeing what was going on in West Philadelphia,
Mm,
I was like, this is crazy. If
mm,
you look at the living equity they're destroying to get a little bit of financial equity, this doesn't make any sense. We had four boarded up HUD fraud deals on the corner of my um it was catty corner at the top of the block, and it was destroying real estate values throughout the neighborhood.
mm,
And I know now how the guys who did the HUD fraud made money. Those houses were sitting up, boarded up and empty for 4 years. And across the street, we had a family of six people living in a one-bedroom apartment. I'm like, four houses are empty, and I got a family of six living in a one-bedroom apartment, and they would take beautiful care of those things instead of them rotting away and destroying the value of our. It's like this makes no sense because the financial equity, the home equity in 100 plus homes is going down and being depressed,
mm.
and they're unhappy, and the buildings are deteriorating in value. If a building like that is empty and boarded up, it can deteriorate, a lot of value. you
Yeah.
you want to you want to get people in there taking care of it. I was like, this is a lose lose lose. And when you talk to the guys who were doing the fraud, it's like they're like, we're making money. I was like, how can you? Well, it's because they had taxpayer credit and they had the dollar reserve system. That's how they were making money.
The madness is on such a level that it's just hard to comprehend.
It's
It's,
demonic. It's spiritual. At the root, it's spiritual. And because to do something about it, I'll never forget your colleague David Hughes. I think he wrote a Substack about this. And he said, I have to bring this up. He said, ever since, I've gone public and told published what I think is really going on, I've lost my position, and all sorts of. He said, all these people have shown up to help me, this person, this person, this person, this person. And then he said, I would like to point out what they all have in common is they're all Christians. And that's because if you're a Christian, you have a very different pricing model in your head. In
mm,
other words, there are things that can be priced in a marketplace, and there's some things that can't be priced
right.
because they are invaluable. They are above, they're not to be traded. And, you are not going to sell your immortal soul
Mm,
for a quick profit,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you understand what you're dealing with here. So, people I know who have really, I would consider true Christians,
Mm,
they truly understand the value of those things which are not visible or those things which are not priced in a market. And they can put money in perspective as a tool and
Like,
not let money be the master. It's
like,
letting money be the master is letting the servant be the master.
yeah, it's like,
And then you get a society and an economy that's not agreement capable, and then things spiral down. And we are in that spiral down now.
yeah, this is what has puzzled me for decades about the fiat system. When I think about how people hand over their lives in pursuit of this instrument of exchange, and they say, or they admit belief in this instrument, that the value comes from what the people say. That is, that people have a belief or a faith in the system itself, and they pursue it. They pursue this token of exchange, and they treat this instrument as though it has some sort of intrinsic value.
It
But
does.
intrinsic value comes from human beings.
Right. So let me explain that. The problem with the dollar system is debt based. If you go, you should read Alexander Murr. So if you go to Del Mar, you should go to Solari. We have a book review on his monetary history.
Hmm.
And what he explains, and I agree totally with him, I think he's one of the great monetary historians in the world. The best currencies are fiat currencies. So a currency, but here's the hard part about doing a fiat currency. You need good governance. If you don't have good governance, you get a mess, which is what our we have two problems. The dollar is debt based and we don't have good governance.
Hmm.
So and I would say in some ways logistically it is So in terms of operations, it's pretty good. In terms of building the trust of and working with the general economy and people, it's not good. But the ideal currency we would want is a fiat currency, not debt based, with a good governance system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is the dollar real? The dollar's so take a stable coin and a dollar,
Mm-hmm.
or take a crypto that doesn't have, any isn't collateralized by anything, whether it's the dollar or gold or anything else. The dollar represents an economy and a participation of 325 million plus people in the United States, and it is backed indirectly by their credit and their value and their assets. Okay, that's real. That
Mm-hmm.
is real. And they are deeply vested in that system. And think of it as like a morphogenic field. The dollar is a field, it's a human field. And it's a human field of trust among all the people who use it.
Right.
And one of the reasons these guys are hoping to use stablecoin to get like 5 billion more people on the dollar is because there are many people around the world who'd rather be in the dollar than in their local currency. That's trust. So,
Mm.
and so what you're dealing with when you deal with something like fiat currency is
Mm.
you're dealing the intersection between morphogenic fields and shared intelligence and money.
Right.
Now, if you look at Bitcoin and the other cryptos, they're trying to create a field. They're trying to create a community. They're trying to create a morphogenic field that will support this crypto on an ongoing basis.
Mm.
And what you've seen in the people who are pumping and dumping crypto or Bitcoin and using it as a pump and dump tool is they're trying to manage that field and build that field for their own purpose.
Filthy lucre.
Not so much filthy lucre because their goal is, yes, they have a goal of making money. Their goal is control,
Hmm.
and they're using it as a pump and dump tool to build control and achieve a variety of things. We have a piece at Solari called Bitcoin Bailout, and I
Mm-hmm.
would recommend it. Remember, money has no intrinsic value. What has intrinsic value are real assets. So it's real people,
Mm.
real livestock, real,
Nature.
gold in the ground,
Yeah.
nature. Okay. And what you want to do is manage your use of money to get more and more real assets, get more and more. So, one of the ways they used Bitcoin was the central bankers wanted to accumulate more gold and they wanted to keep retail out of gold. So part of Bitcoin was to keep everybody out of gold while they kept buying gold.
Mm.
So during that period that they were getting retail on Bitcoin, they were buying more land, more gold, more land, more gold, more land, more gold.
Mm.
So, and Bitcoin was very, very successful at keeping people away from gold. And the most frightening was to keep them away from real assets, real enterprise. So
Mm.
you have a lot of great young people instead of starting businesses that deal with real assets and do something real, they're trading crypto and making money and thinking they're masters of the universe, and they're being kept economically, their economic muscle is being destroyed. So they know a lot about helping Mr. Global figure out how he's going to do an all digital financial system, but how is that a good use of your time, and where does that give you financial muscle?
Yeah, it seems to me that the crypto system, or the value of the crypto system, is grounded in, again, faith, amorphous sort of feeling.
Right. But that faith wouldn't develop unless you had pumpers and dumpers with a huge amount of money to inject money in a variety of strategic ways. So, so the guys who control the fiat system have been using their resources to pump and dump this thing.
Mm.
You've had very strategic use of the money, that the subsidy from the dollar system used to develop this system.
So I think we're at a huge crossroads now with Doge and the Stargate system and all of these technologies that are coming to the fore. Can you offer your
Yeah.
perspective
So the Trump administration, I believed 6 weeks before the convention,
Mm,
I told John there was an article in Foreign Affairs, and I told John, if I'm right, the way this reads to me is the bankers have decided that Trump's their man to get the control grid for them. If you look at the other faction, they can't, they're not going fast enough. They're not making headway. So they're going to use Trump to get the control grid. So they're going to back him for president. That's what I believe happened.
mm,
So, and if you look at the speed that they're moving to build the control grid, it's astonishing.
yeah.
So, Stargate, of course, is to put the data centers in place. The challenge you've got in an all digital financial or transaction system is the energy usage is frightening.
Yeah.
I, I mean, I don't see how we get from here to there because I think the energy use, unless you unless you finally bring in breakthrough energy,
Mm,
which they could do if they had complete control, I don't see how it works. There's one article in February in Bloomberg saying Texas, for its data centers, was going to need 30 new nukes.
wow.
Right. Can you imagine? So, yeah, and they want to remember BlackRock wants to move the stock exchange down there. So, anyway, so Stargate, within a couple days of the new administration, they announced 500 billion for data centers, right?
Mm,
And then the continuation of mRNA injections, which of course I believe is the Internet of Bodies.
mm,
So
yeah.
if you don't understand what I mean by that, go. Purdue has the center on the Internet of Bodies in their engineering school. So go.
I've been writing about this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So they announce, okay, data centers and Internet of Bodies. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then they're pushing the digital ID like crazy, and they just did a new executive order pushing the digital ID. They're trying to get everybody on the real ID system. So the first thing you need is that digital ID, but then you need the data center infrastructure to back up and deal with all the data. Okay. Now, in the meantime, another very key thing you need is you need the central bankers to control fiscal policy, which means you have to finish destroying the civil service. And I
Mm,
would say Doge is, they are working hard to do that. Doge is a much more complicated story. They're trying to get the current expenditures down, and if you're going to go from a unipolar model to a multipolar model, there's all sorts of expenses that are a total waste.
mm,
So Doge is trying to cut expenses and I think engineer a switch to corporate contractors running everything in the civil service, basically not being there to implement congressional will. So you're moving fiscal policy into the control of the bankers. And as a practical matter, it's pretty far that way now because we're running at such big deficits. The minute the central bankers decide to turn off the money, everything stops.
yeah.
So Trump is completely dependent on two characters. He's completely dependent on the central banking system and the Fed, for his day-to-day provision to run the government. But from everything we can tell, this group is totally reporting to the Netanyahu syndicate.
Mm,
And I won't call them Israel because, poor Israel, you know,
yeah.
if you think we have a tapeworm, they've got the tapeworm par excellence. So, Netanyahu and his syndicate, if you look at what he did during the pandemic, he was killing more Israelis than Palestinians.
Yeah.
So, that syndicate appears to be in total control day to day to day. And my concern is, Netanyahu wants Trump to engineer a war with Iran, and it looks like they're trying.
It does look that way.
Yep. And for the life of me, I don't see how they win. I think whatever they do, unless they have a pretend war, which, Trump has been known to do, then, if you try to have a real war, since you can't put boots on the ground, you're going to lose. And if you lose, I can see how it makes the neocons more powerful in terms of economic plunder. But the only way, your next step, you have two choices. You can, because the East-West strategy failed, you didn't implode Russia. Now you've got to get Canada, Greenland, and Panama because if you
Mm,
can't go east-west, you're going to go north-south. So Trump is being very open about educating the American people about what you need to keep the model going. If,
Right.
but while you do that, their plan is clearly to plunder their own populations. They've been plundering all around the world, and now they're ready to plunder certainly the US big time. So they part of what Doge is they're just going in and stealing the data. I
Mm,
mean, that data to Musk's XAI and X,
mm,
he's out in the market raising capital for those things now, and stealing all that data and putting it in his AI is dramatically would skyrocket the capital value of that stock.
yeah.
So
Mm,
I think they're just privatizing. They if you look at the 21 trillion, they've stolen everything you can kind of steal with the money, or a lot. But now you can steal the data and the land and mineral resources. So I think they're going to plunder the balance sheet. That's what they're doing. I think they're working on a plunder plan. Now, will they get away with it? I don't know. Crypto is a big part of that. And but the core thing they need the crypto to do is to extend the dollar system. And so if you look at their plan to extend stable coins globally, it's
mhm.
very clever. And it could give the dollar a much longer life.
We shall see, huh?
Right.
This has been an illuminating discussion. May I close up with just one more question?
Sure.
I mean, do you have any thoughts on how best to awaken people from this, what seems to be a daydream or a fantasy world that all these technologies we've been talking about and policies are necessarily beneficent?
So here's my recommendation. The first thing you want to do is always tell the truth. But you want to tell the truth to people in a way that is useful for them. So a lot of times what I think about is how can I use my knowledge to help somebody in the way they wish to be helped?
Mm,
So I think you need to respect that most people feel overwhelmed and busy, and you need to feed your knowledge to them in a way that they find most useful.
mm,
The second thing I find is that there are people who want to know and people who don't want to know. And if you spend all your time educating and helping the people who do want to know, you're going to get a lot more done. And what's going to happen is all the people who didn't want to know are going to watch you, and the people who, here's the thing. If you look at food, health, energy, shelter, community,
mm,
the people 3 years before the pandemic who wanted to know, when
mm,
the pandemic hit, they surfed the wave and did great. Just, they did great
mm,
because they understood how to use their time productively: food, health, energy, shelter. They didn't get, so many people got just slaughtered. They
right.
didn't get slaughtered. And the most heartbreaking thing they had to deal with in the middle of that success was watching family and friends basically kill themselves.
Mm,
Whether it's kill themselves economically or kill, but it was because they didn't, you know, they were killed not by a vaccine, not by, change in business circumstances. They were killed because they had a bad map. And the reason they had a bad map is they didn't want to know.
mm,
So when you see what constantly happens to us at Soleri is people turning up and saying, I listened to you then and I thought you were crazy. And now I realize you were right. And if I'd listened to you, I wouldn't have lost my business, or I wouldn't be disabled, or, whatever.
mm,
What happens is, as you help the people who will take action to improve their situation, other people see how successful they are and they want to get on board the train. So you have to build success, you have to lead with success, and you need to help them. The more and any business person will tell you this, you want to invest in your performers because they will lead the success and other people will be drawn in to follow the success.
mm,
So what I try to do is focus entirely on the people who our education can make a huge difference because they will take action.
mm,
And that action makes a huge difference to their, you know, to their well-being. They they don't fall for the financial frauds. They don't fall for the health frauds. They don't get tricked. They know how to navigate. I can tell you hundreds of stories of subscribers coming back with these amazing things. The precious dealer called me and you're going to be angry. I did talk to him, but I knew they were using entrainment on the phone and I didn't fall for it. I didn't say yes. I hung up because I knew they were using entrainment. So you get these little tidbits and you say, okay, it's working. So I think it's very important. What I do is if I'm in a group of people I have no interest in knowing,
Hmm.
I never or I rarely try and interrupt their flow to introduce reality. Now, I will occasionally when I see them planning on doing something that's going to kill a child. It's just like I can't I can't stand to sit and do nothing.
Right.
Right. And there's something else you have to learn how to do, and I really had to learn that because remember, I I went from a person who had a Rolodex of 5,000 the most powerful people in the world to somebody that no one would even talk to. Right. I was shunned by everybody and everything with rare exception. The only people who talked to me is somebody I paid. Right. So that was my life. So, and uh and I was lucky because I had some people in my family who wouldn't drop me. And the reason they wouldn't drop me was I had been wealthy and I had always been very financially generous with anybody in my family who needed or wanted help.
Mhm.
And so I had a wealthy uncle who said, look, she didn't ditch us, so I'm not going to ditch her. But and it was interesting because over the 11 years that I litigated, people gifted or repaid me. I had gifted or lent 250,000. Over the 11 years, that 250,000 came back, saved my life. If I hadn't put that 250,000 in the people bank, because the people bank is the one bank they can never control or shut off.
Amen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Human beings.
Human beings who are trustworthy.
Yeah.
I got people all around the world who got little pots of cash from me, and there's no record, there's no agree. It's just based on trust.
Mm.
But if I'm in your community and I need, money for a motel, I've got some stash.
Catherine Austin Fitz, thank you so much for the talk. Really.
Well, thank you so much for your work because when you first published that article, Mass Formation versus Mass Atrocity,
Mm.
it settled the argument in the health freedom movement and it caused a huge shift in paradigm. And I'd been trying to do that for 2 years, but I just didn't have the scholarship that you and your colleagues brought to the table. And but you just put it over the top, and you saved me from chronic frustration. 2 years of chronic frustration watching people get tricked. So I really appreciate you, Daniel. It's been a thrill to,
Yeah.
and I apologize. I kind of talked your head off, but
No, it was wonderful, wonderful talk. I really appreciate it.
okay. Well, my prayer for you is you're going to fall in love with money, master it, and it'll just help you with your work that much more.